Started, and hopefully this doesn't take too long, but I want to start by introducing myself. I'm Rick Cobb. I'm the Superintendent of Schools here in Midtown. Well, thank you. I hope you feel that way in a couple of hours. And I appreciate you coming out and taking the time. It's just a very, I don't know if interesting is too much of a euphemism, but it is definitely an interesting time to be leading a school district, and I do have the privilege of leading this district and have for 3 years. And you know, from our position over in the central office and around me on our leadership team, we've been spending the last several weeks thinking about every possible scenario that we can, so that we can make decisions if there's a teacher walkout next week, for if it's a short-term deal or a long-term deal. And every day we think of something that we haven't previously considered, and every day we think of something that complicates maybe something that we had clarity on a couple of days ago, and so you know, our planning is really fluid. So I appreciate you taking the time to come out and be here tonight, so that we can tell you what we know and what we hope, and we can honestly tell you what we don't know, because there are going to be some things that fall into that category as well. So I'm going to go through a very short PowerPoint presentation. I don't believe in long PowerPoint presentations. And hopefully this only takes about 15 or 20 minutes of the time that we have, and then we'll do some Q&A. We have microphone stands set up in each of these aisles, and we'll just let people line up and ask questions for about an hour, and then we'll stick around after about 7:30 and meet with people for as long as we can tonight. So let's start with this slide. Oklahoma's 50th in the country in average teacher salary, 49th in funding per student, and 50th in capital expenditures per student. These are all just factual numbers about spending, about teacher pay in Oklahoma, and it doesn't even get into support employee pay, but we're pretty low in that area. This is a graphic that we have seen all over social media for the last couple of weeks, and we decided to use it tonight. But then we added the figures in the right-hand column there. You know, we get funding per pupil. Our state aid comes in on a per student basis, and it's less per pupil than we were getting 10 years ago. And if what we were getting right now in state aid matched what we were getting 10 years ago, this school year we would have an additional $3.2 million to work with. And so that's kind of an idea of what the cuts are. It's not that we've lost $3.2 million a year every year for 10 years. Sometimes it was less, sometimes it was more. But over the last 10 years, it's about $20 million cumulatively. So if you think about the last 10 years in this district, what we could have done with an extra $2 or $3 million a year, to the tune of $20 million total, things look a lot different. Our teacher salaries are higher, our support salaries are higher. We have more consistent maintenance repair and that kind of thing. We probably have more modern buses, and some of the things that were in the bond election that you all passed last fall could have been taken care of through our general fund spending. But that's not where this is where we are. And when I talk in a little bit about operational costs, just keep that number in mind, $3.2 million. Just if we went back to where we were in state aid 10 years ago, we'd have an additional $3 million plus that we would be working with in this school year. Okay? This is a lot of words on the screen, and I'll summarize it. Last night, the House of Representatives passed a series of bills that would fund teacher raises, support staff raises, and restore some of the losses in operational costs. Not all of them, not a lot of them, in fact, but we'll get to that. It's a series of bills. On the next screen are the revenue measures, the taxes that would go up, and a lot of it comes from very different sources. But the bills they passed last night would fund a minimum of $5,000 at the bottom of the salary schedule and a maximum of $9,600 and change at the top of the salary schedule. It's on a percentage basis. On average, teachers who are currently working in the state of Oklahoma would receive about a $6,100 raise based on the bills that passed last night. It still takes the Senate to pass them and the governor to sign them, and it would have to be all of them, not just some of them, for this to all work. So keep that in mind, that there's something that has been done. There's a pay package that's been put out there. This would represent the largest salary increase in state history for teachers. So I'm excited that there's progress being made on that front. But I'm going to back up for a second and tell a little bit of a story. A few weeks ago, we sent a group of people to a job fair at East Central University in Ada. And I think they had one person stop by the booth. Is that right? One person stopped by the booth because we were set up next to Mesquite, Texas. And Mesquite, Texas had this big sign, and their starting salary was $54,000. It's 20, and if there are teachers here, I probably should have told you to not listen to that part. But we have our starting salary, we have our salary schedule out there, and they have theirs in big giant print, and it's $20,000. Their starting salary is $20,000 higher. When we go to job fairs, they're full. They're at our colleges and universities in Oklahoma, but they're full of school districts from Texas recruiting our people, recruiting our talent out of state. And we usually get stuck somewhere between Mesquite and Midland because it's alphabetical. That's helpful. If we were next to Moore, Mustang, we'd be kind of on an even playing field at least. A $6,000 raise for teachers, or $5,000 raise in starting salary, next year we could be at that job fair and only be $15,000 behind Mesquite. That is if they don't raise their salaries. And so when I say that I'm thankful that the legislature is really finally paying attention to what we're dealing with as school districts, what I want to say on top of that is this has to be the start. This does not have to be the whole thing that happens. It took 10 years of waiting around for things to get as bad as they are right now that teachers are fed up and willing to walk out. We're not going to fix that in one legislative session. And so it's going to have to be something that goes on next year and the year after that and the year after that. And we have to be relentless in our pursuit of what our schools deserve and what our kids need. We have to be absolutely relentless about that. The next paragraph up here, if you'll go back, please. Not forward. There you go. Talks about support raises. Our support staff in this district work really hard. We have about 600 support employees. They are on a variety of calendar lengths. They have more varied job descriptions than I could probably rattle off the top of my head. It's secretaries, it's child nutrition employees, it's bus drivers, library assistants, teacher assistants. There are a whole lot of people that fall into the category of support employees. And you know, being in our schools, that's a big part of the glue and the fabric that holds our schools together. And so we're happy that there's something in here for raises for them as well. I think that what OEA was asking was significantly higher than this, but that's true really in every line of the slide. The next paragraph appropriates an additional $50 million that goes back into the funding formula, well, for different line item things. 33 of that 50 million is for textbooks. The textbook money has been cut for several years, which is why we had to pass a bond to help us buy textbooks. And as of this summer, we will be up to date in reading and math textbooks finally, and not have math books that are 10 years old. Thank you for passing the bond to get us in that position. That leaves about $17 million from House Bill 3705 that would be distributed to schools all across Oklahoma. And I'm going to do some really oversimplified math here. Middale has about 2% of the student population in the state of Oklahoma. We have a little over 14,000 kids. There are about 700,000 students in the state of Oklahoma. So we have a little more than 2% of the student population. So if you just want to do easy math, when you see a number and it's a statewide number, ask yourself what 2% of that number is. And 2% of that $17 million that's left over after textbooks is about $340,000. So we're down about $3.2 million a year, and about 10% of that's going to come back to us. That's not enough to help us restore all the things that we cut 2 years ago when we had the massive budget shortfall that the state had. We eliminated over 60 teaching positions. We have some elementary schools with shared librarians, which means there are days in 4 of our elementary schools that the library is not even open. If you can imagine an elementary school with the library not open, because when I think of elementary schools, the first thing I think of is the library. And so we're in a position where we hope to be able to bring some of those cuts back, but it's not a lot. And so that's why we keep telling the legislators, thank you, this is a great start, but this can't be all that happens over the next several years as you're restoring funding to education. And I think most of them get that, I really do. But it's taken us 2 special sessions to get here. All right, now we can change slides. This is the revenue package that was contained in last night's bills that went through the House. House Bill 1010 increased the gross production tax to 5%. Historically, that was at 7% and was lowered for different incentives for oil and gas companies. And there's been just a lot of debate about how that has contributed to the budget shortfalls that we've had. There's a $1 a pack cigarette tax, 3-cent tax on gas, 6-cent tax on a gallon of diesel. There's a hotel motel tax in there, which was a surprise to me. I was not expecting to see that last night, nor was I expecting to see as much discussion and controversy about that as there was last night. Itemized deductions capped at $17,000, excluding medical expenses and charitable contributions, and ball and dice game expansion at our Indian casinos. The bottom one there, the ball and dice expansion, they've actually calculated no revenue for the first year from that change, because I think it'll take the casinos around the state a while to adapt to that. So they expect it to generate revenue, but they're not budgeting for now, which I think is responsible, but it's good to know that that's on the horizon. All right, next. 2 weeks ago, March 12th, at our board meeting, we passed a resolution. Our board unanimously voted to support teachers if they decided to walk out. And that's if. That's not us telling our teachers to, it's our teachers telling us, hey, we're gonna, and us responding to that. We want to support our teachers, period. And how that changes if the Senate and governor go ahead and approve everything that was passed last night, I don't know, because I'm not telling you that I have the pulse of every teacher in the school district right now. But our board has been very supportive. Our board meeting 2 weeks ago was almost like a pep rally. It was like nothing I'd ever seen at a board meeting before, and it was really exciting. It really shows the strength of the community that we have in the school district. Next. Because of the board resolution, and knowing just what the political climate is in Oklahoma right now, we added an absence code. Sorry, I'm being told that I'm not holding the microphone close enough. I apologize for that. We added an absence code in our teacher leave system just for walkout. It's not going to charge them with leave if they select that absence code. And based on the number of teachers that we have saying that they will be absent on a given day, we have to decide if it's safe and reasonable to have school. Just to give you a little bit of numbers, probably too many numbers, during this current school year, the most number of substitutes that were needed in one school day was 112. I'm sorry, substitutes requested. The most number of sub jobs that we filled in a given day is 85. So we have a lot of days that we have substitutes requested and we can't fill all of them anyway. Well, right now we already have over 200 teachers that are telling us that they will be participating in the walkout on Monday. If the Senate passes the bills and the governor signs them, I don't know how that changes. I assume that number would come down some, but I'm telling you that right now we already have the data to know that it would be not feasible to have school on Monday if nothing changes at the Capitol. I can also tell you that traditionally the legislature has not worked past Wednesday, the week of Easter, and if that's true this week and nothing has happened, we would know pretty early about what's about not having school on Monday. But I've also heard that there are legislators willing to work later than they typically do, even into the weekend if necessary, to try to avoid a teacher walkout. Again, it's the legislature. I can't speak for them. I can't predict what they'll do. But I'm hoping that some kind of resolution comes this week so that if there is a walkout, that it's really brief. What we will also do after Monday, I think we'll have some advance notice about Monday, and from there it gets day to day. It might be a one-day walkout, it might go many, many days, we don't know. And we will make every effort to notify parents of what the school situation is by 7 o'clock the evening before. So if we have a walkout on Monday, and the legislature's working all day Monday to try to get something passed and sent to the governor, and we don't know by 7 o'clock that night, then we'll make that decision, and we'll let you know. And that's pretty much what the procedure is going to have to be. Go ahead. As I've mentioned, the legislature has not actually funded a pay raise in 10 years. And the way teacher pay works in Oklahoma is that the state sets a minimum salary schedule, and districts are free to pay above that salary schedule, and we do pay a little bit above the state schedule, but not much because we can't really afford it. We have about 900 certified teachers in this district, and when you figure in our fixed costs like FICA, Medicare, and teacher retirement, a $1,000 raise for 900 people costs over $1 million. So for every $1,000 we wanted to go over the state minimum, that's another $1 million we're spending as a school district. And you saw the first couple of slides, we're millions and millions short from where we used to be. It would be hard to get above the state minimum farther than what we are right now. We'd like to, but there's going to have to be more revenue coming in for us to do that. And so after 10 years of no state-funded teacher raises, we've just reached the point where teachers across Oklahoma feel like they've been promised time and time again that something would change, and it hasn't. The governor has called 2 special legislative sessions since summer to try to fix the revenue problems and fund a teacher raise. And in November, they were 5 votes short of actually passing a package that would have funded a $3,000 raise for teachers. And then in February, the House was 13 votes short of passing a package that would have funded $5,000 in teacher raises. It had nothing for support, and it had nothing to restore operational costs, but they got close and couldn't get it done. So that's why we're in the position we're in. The fact that a larger tax package passed in the House last night, I think it had 79 votes for it, and I think it was 79 to 19, if I remember correctly. That says a lot about the resolve and how attitudes at the Capitol are changing, just because boards like our school board have stood up and said, we're going to support teachers if they walk out. Right now, the number of districts, I forget the number of districts that have said they would participate in a walkout, but the number of students represented by those districts is over 500,000. Which means that 5 out of every 7 students in Oklahoma would be in a district that's participating in the teacher walkout. So I think it has their attention. There's no maximum number of days that a work stoppage or walkout could last. And I apologize for having to drink so much water. I feel like I've been talking all day. But we're required to have 1,080 hours of instruction by law. We have a longer school day than we have to, so that we can bank time and bank snow days, basically. We took 2 snow days in February, and we have 5 snow days left that we can use. So if there's a teacher walkout and it lasts 5 days or fewer, we won't have to add any time to the end of the school year. But if it goes more than 5 days, we would have to. We would have to come up with a way to make up that time. We could make the school day longer. We could add days into the year. The problem with making the school day longer is that's a solution that works great when you take your snow days in January or February. When you take them in April, you're kind of running out of time. So we think that we would be a little bit limited in what we could do there. By law, we have to end the school year by June 30th. There are other considerations that we would have to take, that we would have to have as well. But you know, what we're trying to do as a leadership team and as a district is plan for the first 5 days. And then once we get into those days, if it happens, start planning for the next 5. And when we get into those, start planning for the next 5. And the longer it goes, the harder all of that is, the more hardship that creates for families, for our staff, for our kids. It's not easy to think about all of this, but as I talk to our teachers and I talk to other superintendents around the state, I think the resolve is there to not back down from this. Go ahead. I mentioned that we would have to make up school days if the work stoppage goes more than 5. And so I've kind of covered the first paragraph there. 2 of the questions that we've been getting a lot are about graduation and prom. Those dates and venues will not change. We have contracts in place. If we have to have school days after graduation, it's something that's been done before, so it's not that unusual. It's not ideal, but none of this is really ideal right now, so we're just trying to plan for it. Next. We did a survey a couple of weeks ago, and I asked teachers, under what conditions would you be willing to participate in a teacher walkout? And they came back with a lot of concerns. First and foremost was if we can still feed the kids. The second was if we take care of support staff, and then if nobody loses any pay. And then it got into different things like activities and prom. Prom was a big one as well. The fact that the 2 most frequent concerns were about kids and about support staff tells you what kind of people we have teaching in our schools. They're concerned about themselves, but they want to make sure that what they do does not hurt others. And that, again, makes me very proud to work here and to be a leader in this district. There was a lot of unity about that. About 7% of teachers said under no circumstances would I want to have a walkout. So that means 93% said yes, but with conditions. Actually, some of them said, we don't care, I don't care what the conditions are. This should have happened 3 years ago. And they're probably not wrong. But, there's a lot of unity around the idea of having a teacher walkout. There's not a lot of unity around the idea of what to do with activities. The people who teach and coach and sponsor different extracurricular activities in this district, most of them have told us that they want to continue doing those things. I think the reason is, the thing that I hear the most, is that we can make up school days, but if you're a high school student, and you're playing baseball or soccer, or you're involved in an activity where people are going to come and watch you play, and you're trying to earn a scholarship to college, you can't get that time back. And I think that's what's driving most of the desire. But I can tell you that we do have some teachers who are split on this and aren't excited about continuing with activities. So our plan is to continue with activities, and there might be some instances where that doesn't happen. And that will be something that we have to communicate as effectively as we can. One of the questions that keeps coming up is if we do have any kind of suspension of activities, will coaches still receive a stipend? Well, if you're coaching soccer, for example, you began coaching the season in good faith. You've had a lot of practices and a lot of games. We wouldn't dock your pay for a rain out. So we're committed to doing everything that we can to take care of our employees and especially take care of our students in these situations. We're not going to move practices during the school day during a walkout. I mean, if we're continuing with baseball, for example, that doesn't mean that the coach can call everybody and say, hey, let's try to have practice up at the school at 10 o'clock in the morning. Everything will be after school. We will not be providing transportation for students to get here for those events and those practices. But things after school will carry on as planned. There are some events that are scheduled during the school day, like golf tournaments. If you play golf, golf courses don't want to lose green fees on the weekend, so golf tournaments, high school golf tournaments typically happen during the week. Anything that's scheduled like that would continue as planned. We have some out-of-state trips planned, like DECA has an out-of-state trip. People have raised money, hotels, airfare has been purchased, so we're not taking those things away from kids because you can't replace them and you can't reschedule them. So there's a lot of that that's gone into consideration. Logistically, because of transportation needs, we would not be able to carry on with activities in elementary and middle school, but the plan is to continue with what we were doing in high school. Let's go ahead. And I talked about out-of-state trips, and those again are approved by the board, and all the fundraising's been done, and things have been bought and paid for, so we're going to continue with that. If there's a specific question that you have about an activity and how it affects your kid, rather than coming to the microphone later with that, because I want to answer as many questions as we can about just broad general things. But if you have a specific question, Andy Collier, would you raise your hand and wave? He's so thrilled I did that. If you have a specific question about an activity, you might want to visit with Andy when this is over tonight. Okay. I need to read this slide carefully because I think we've changed this paragraph more than just about anything else. The Midtown Technology Center serves both adult students and high school students. Therefore, full-time Midtown Technology Center students the center will not be in session if there's a work stoppage. The classes that will take place are the adult-only classes that are in the evening. The practical nursing program will continue in industry-specific training and swaps. The daycare program will also be closed. And Rick Mendenhall is here if you have questions about that and how that is all going to be handled. We're in a unique situation because we're the only school district in the state that also has its own technology center. Every other school district that sends students to Career Tech sends them to a whole different system. But our board is not only over our 23 elementary, middle, and high schools, but our board is also over the tech center here. So we're all kind of in the same boat together with that. Concurrent classes, that's another question that we got. That's all through Rose State College, so we don't have any say over their schedule. Our students that are in high school will need to continue to attend concurrent classes if there's a teacher walkout. Testing is a big question because Monday also is the beginning of the testing window for the state. I've had a lot of questions about that. We've been getting a lot of Facebook messages asking questions about this recently as well. Superintendent Hoffmeister, State Superintendent Hoffmeister, has told us that there will be no changes made to the testing schedule. And if there's a teacher walkout that lasts 2 or 3 days, we can adjust and be fine. There's enough time built into the testing calendar that we can make adjustments and make it work. If it goes beyond a week, or if it goes 2 weeks, then we're going to run into the end of the testing window. And at that point, the state would have to be in a position to ask the federal government for some flexibility in our testing window. And it could get really tricky, but that's going to be out of our hands. We've had questions specifically about ACT and SAT testing. The national ACT and SAT testing dates are set by those entities. We do have ACT testing on all 3 of our high school campuses, and I think the next national test date is a week from Saturday. So what would that be, the 12th, 13th, something like that? 14th, thank you. And so our staff that works the ACT on those days actually get paid by ACT to work on those days. So I don't think we're going to have any problems getting that done. Those things will continue as planned. When we get into May, I really can't see this going into May, but I guess, again, I can't predict what the legislature is going to do. AP test dates are set by the College Board, and those dates cannot be changed. We will have AP tests in May as scheduled. We've had teachers have a lot of concerns about that, and we're going to try to get all of their questions answered, but that's going to be a conversation probably that Megan Bryant has to have with the College Board to answer some of those questions that even things I was asked walking in here tonight. So we're trying to get answers to all of those things. Third grade testing is another question that we've been asked several times through social media. And my answer is pretty simple on that. The test is not the only thing that determines whether a third grade child is promoted to 4th grade. In fact, if there's no test, we already have enough data, we have enough student work, we have enough interaction with our kids. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I get on the soapbox when I talk about the third grade test, because we don't need the test to know who our kids are and what they're capable of. So that's a decision that will be made between teachers and parents and the school in general. So I think that we can live without that data if we don't have it in a timely fashion. That's one thing that the state has told us, is that if we don't get tests done by a certain date, then we don't get our preliminary test scores back by June 1st. And I've got to tell you, we didn't get test scores back until November this year. We still managed to have a school year. So it's helpful to have that information, not necessarily to look at it on a student by student basis, but to look at it on on the big scale to see, when you collect all of that data and see what your strengths and weaknesses are as a school or as a grade level, I think it really helps you plan for the next year. So it's nice when we get it during the summer, but in all the years, I've been an administrator since 2002, and it's about every other year that we get that data during the summer or that we don't. So it's not gonna slow us down really if we don't have it, is what I'm trying to say. Next. We have 5 locations planned to feed children if there's a teacher walkout. One of them is our central office, which is right on 15th Street behind this building. It will be in the parking lot behind the central office. And then 4 churches in the community: Cornerstone, East Point, Sunny Lane Family Church, and Sunny Lane United Methodist Church. All will be feeding sites for breakfast and lunch for our students. These are not drop-off sites, so please understand that we do not have childcare available. According to the grant that we will be using to provide meals for students, meals are supposed to be consumed on site. So if you're bringing a child up to one of these feeding locations, please stay there while the meal is consumed. I think the average 3rd grader consumes a meal in about 48 seconds anyway, so in middle school it's a little bit shorter. So we want to make sure that we can feed people as much as possible. The thing that really concerns me, I had a friend in another district text me last night and say, what concerns you most about the walkout? And I said, honestly, is that we're going to have kids miss meals. And that's just, I mean, okay, other than all the chaos that's possible from all of this, the truth is, I think that we all worry about our kids who rely on us for meals. And we wish that it wasn't that way in our community, but it is that way in a lot of our community, and we want to be there for them. So we're going to do everything that we can to be there for them. And we got the serving times up here: 9 to 10:30 for breakfast, and 12:30 to 2 for lunch. And hopefully this doesn't happen. Hopefully, if it does happen, it's a short period of time. But thankfully, we have people in our community and support from churches that'll help us out with this. From the minute that talk started of a teacher walkout, we had churches and community organizations and individuals reaching out, wanting to know how they can help us help kids. And I think, again, it speaks to the kindness of people in this world and here in Middale, that's been the response. You know, we have a grant that's going to help us do this feeding, but then we have a lot of people wanting to donate things on top of that too. And so we're trying to manage all the things that people want to do. Stephanie Wilson with the Ymca, you're back there, handed me this flyer right before, actually someone handed it to me before we started, that there will be drop-in care available at the Y. Prices are listed on here, so we're going to try to get that information out to people as much as possible. I know there are different organizations around the Middale area and around the metro in general that are offering day camps, and we're going to try to compile that information. There are websites that are compiling that information, and it's sort of like a statewide resource list for families during the teacher walkout. And it's just an amazing thing, because what it shows is that no matter how people feel about a teacher walkout, they want to be there for kids. And so I think that's kind of an overview of where we are and how we've gotten here. And at this point, if anybody who wants to ask a question would go to either one of these 2 microphones, I'll just alternate back and forth between the microphones.